Very warm welcome and hello to everyone listening from all of the different conference venues. My name is Jomy Joseph, and it is my pleasure to present to you the paper Critical Futures Today: Backcasting Speculative Product Design Towards Long-Term Futures and Sustainability. This paper attempts to propose a solution-finding method for speculative product design, which explores radical future scenarios beyond business as usual. Now, this presentation will show what such a solution-driven speculative exploration could mean for product design practice through the case of a 3D printed optical solar cell. Now, with the onset of cataclysmic climate breakdown, organized human life is presented with a bleak future. And even within our collective imagination, we are presented with increasingly dystopian visions of the future. Climate change has narrowed our possibilities of the future, and as it turns out, it has become far easier for us to imagine the end of the world than to imagine a better, more hopeful future. Now, if we are to avoid these self-fulfilling prophecies of dystopias, we need better alternatives that can prevent a defuturing of human civilization itself. For product designers like myself, it opens up an interesting question. How can design contribute to imagining better futures? And what could this designerly way of futuring be? But in order to design for a radically different future, we must be able to imagine a world that doesn't yet exist. The designer then must pose what-if questions for a possible solution space to open up. The primary aim here is not to completely solve this speculative future, but to imagine possibilities. Therefore, it is crucial to work with a suspension of disbelief and sometimes even apologize for why certain phenomena might work as such. This paper will also make the case for how designers, using their very skills, can help create these visions of radical futures possible today through pragmatic backcasting of products and artifacts. So the aim of this method is to allow for alternative visions to be explored, and as such adapts different methods and tools from future studies, design fiction, virtual reality, and film studies. Now, these tools here are applied within a speculative design practice. As you can see in this iterative framework, we first start with the notion of mapping a hopeful future beyond predictions and projections. These hopeful future drivers are based on the values of the designer in the ecological, socio-technical, and even political framework that they themselves want to see manifested in their visions. These drivers are taken forward into a design fiction, creating narratives that build a world around the artifact. From here, there are two directions one could take. The designer could either choose to explore the solution by making a futuristic product directly from the design fiction, or explore an immersive virtual reality and a concept film sketch of the future vision, which is what we will see later. This future artifact is pragmatically backcasted then into a solution that can be used today for creating radical change for a better future. In this case, it's a solar cell. So here I will present an exploration of what all this means and the outcomes we can expect if we apply this method in a single iteration in the case of a solar cell. So when it comes to mapping the future of solar, I created a futures poker game adapted from the one made by Strange Telemetry. But this deck of cards was designed specifically for the theme of this project. Each of the driver cards represent the social, ecological, economic, and technological drivers based on projections mapped onto a three horizons framework that in turn is made from the existing literature on all of these topics. Now, the game is simple. The dealer chooses the time and the place in the future, and each player gets 3 cards in a random order and has 4 minutes to use them and come up with a compelling future narrative. In this case, the focus has been on a product. So as you can see, this is the example of what design fiction, which focuses on future products, would look like. In this format, the context, the story, and the sketch of the future scenario work together to give you a slice of the future, where each is pointing towards a possible product solution. So at all times then, the designer is expected to keep being engaged in a suspension of disbelief. And as we explore the solar cell that imbibes the logic of this futuristic landscape, the focus again is deliberately kept on the product. In this case, you see the poles that are sticking out of the ground are actually the solar panels. Here I must point out that while writing the design fiction, the design may not have been solved completely. It is still in the realm of speculation. Now here we start to design for this future context, and in the case of an unknown future, the speculative fiction itself can be used as a blueprint for a design brief. At this stage, we must remember that we are focusing our attention towards the product, but also still apologizing for certain inconsistencies in the design fiction. This means that we can explore possible technologies based on an assumption that this product was truly functional. However, we must avoid the magic box solution approach. In this case, highlighted in purple, you have pointers to what the solar cell could do and should do, and the post-its that are posted here try to project and predict what would make this product work. The other colors represent secondary technologies and environmental conditions. In many ways, this process is simultaneously about world building and problem solving. I do have to make it clear that this practice does not follow a strictly linear function. This might as well be a back and forth process, depending on the design problem itself. Now, so as a point of departure, I took these findings from the design fiction directly into a virtual reality sketch, which I has explored in a conceptual film. Now, a concept film here is presented, which is actually shot entirely in virtual reality from a first-person perspective, as you would if you had a camera with you in it. Now, the visual effects are also done in post-production. So let's get started.
Genesis greetings to you, Mal. I assume you slept well. I hope you are ready for your initiation ceremony today. This must be an exciting moment for you. It is time for you to finally peer out into the open world as you go forth for your first research and energy harvest beyond the biodome. The world beyond has much to offer you. As you get initiated along with your brothers and sisters, you will be provided with a research kit along with an energy staff, while your suit is prepped for your study beyond the biodome. You must plant the staffs in the possible configurations you see before you. Sowing the energy harvest should not be so hard once you analyze the best combination of starlight, wind, and ionizing radiation. And don't worry, I will be with you always to help you about with the expedition. Have fun.
So as you can tell from the narrative, here is our hero, Mal, in her biosuit with her solar staff that is used to produce solar energy. This energy staff is made up of these three functions of solar, wind, and radioactive energy harvesting. They are driven into the radioactive soil where a black fungus eats the radiation in the soil to make energy from it. Now, when it is time for the harvest, they pluck the mushrooms which have eaten the radioactive soil and converted it to energy, which effectively cleans up the soil. The staff is also hinged in the middle where the carbon nanotube muscles captures wind energy while the staff sways in the wind. It is worth mentioning that the apologizing exercise that we did earlier with the design fiction helps us design these solutions, which is technically achievable because it is based on existing technological literature. So from the film, we gather that the energy in this future is a community ritual where a drone is used together with the AI to make the holes and find the best locations for these solar stuffs to transmit energy back. Now, these solar cells are actually based on a biomimetic arrangement to capture more sunlight, inspired by the internal scattering of light in the hair of a polar bear, which traps as much sunlight as possible. Now that we've imagined a different future, we can think about the form of backcasting that we would need to undertake to help us make alternative solar cells today. In this case, a more pragmatic backcasting, which doesn't prescribe accuracy, but rather speculation of visioning of long-term sustainability in the form of a product solution today. Now, this is where we diverge from a traditional speculative design project. So the foresight afforded by these speculations enable a technological frame to think of these future solar cells through solar inks and solar structures that can possibly create these three-dimensional solar cells. I found two research papers that suggested making solar cells out of fiber optics, and another one suggested graphene as a solar cell. Now, taking these technological frames further, a traditional industrial design process can be followed by exploring possible visions of product solutions, which is what I did as I explored the concept of a 3D printed optical solar cell that could be ready to plug into our infrastructure today. It is basically a self-contained solar module where the main solar cell is a 3D printed fiber optic structure that is etched with graphene that can convert a broad spectrum of solar radiation to energy. The structure in this concept is based on the gill's mushroom to increase the internal reflection and absorption of light. A phase change material absorbs the solar radiation in the day and works at night, releasing heat that the cell converts again. Now, the concept is modular, which means it has built-in storage, is infinitely scalable, and this kind of solar cell can be actually docked onto and mounted on structures. And thus, we can begin to challenge the notion of a rooftop approach to solar energy. Now, when mounted on vertically dense urban skyscrapers, the cells could also additionally capture the reflections and scattered incident sunlight off of other buildings, in addition to direct sunlight. So at night, the urban heating effect becomes a possible source of infrared radiation that the graphene can actually capture, thereby greatly enhancing the efficiency of these cells. The vertical facades of existing buildings can thus be transformed into solar panels, and thus cities become net generators of energy instead of net consumers, without the need for massive infrastructure. So as a form of time travel, the alternative solar cell from this speculative future can be made today using the tools we already have. Here you can see what a transparent optical structure inspired by the futuristic biomimetic concept can look like for an internal scattering of sunlight. Now, these optical structures are resin printed at 100 microns, and as I mentioned, the point of this exploration is to suggest solutions and not to prove them. That means that beyond this, ideally, this project would be opened up for more research inputs from other technological researchers and reworked or handed down further that proves the technologies and applications themselves. So in the case of these solar cells, these speculations serve as a point of departure for alternative technologies. Now finally, in the absence of a perfect world with perfect solutions, designers can start opening up an alternative space for these better futures. The point of doing so is not to engage with how things are, but how they could be. These designerly speculations can be considered a form of interdimensional time travel that open up spaces for envisioning new possibilities. Can we then imagine a world where designers start to create these better, more hopeful what-if scenarios towards long-term sustainability, decoupled from the dystopian visions of business as usual? I sure hope so. Thank you.